So I'm a little late to the party, but I finally have seen Thanksgiving, Eli Roth's new horror movie, which is about an axe-wielding maniac terrorizing the residents of Plymouth, Massachusetts after a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, picking off victims one by one. The seemingly random revenge killings soon become part of a larger, sinister plan. I love Eli Roth's horror movies, and I'm so happy to see him back working in the genre. Especially Hostel is definitely one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I think that that movie is so effective in what it conveys. And getting back to Thanksgiving, what's kind of interesting about this is that this definitely feels like probably Eli Roth's most mainstream horror movie that he's made yet. It feels like it's got a little bit less teeth. It kind of pulls its punches a little bit. I guess just not as mean-spirited, but it still has a lot of great gore, kills, and it definitely is a pretty messed up movie. I'd say probably the thing that feels the most like Eli Roth in this movie is probably the characters, which, you know, they're not incredibly strong. Never have they really been in Eli Roth's movies before, but some of the writing and stuff is kind of what makes me and reminds me that this is an Eli Roth movie. But what really works about it is that I think that it achieves a comedic undertone really well. It's very funny. Seems like it has a lot of satire on consumerism and stuff like that, Black Friday, and kind of tying that into Thanksgiving, and it does it really well. You could tell it's going for a more satirical take on this material, so the focus isn't really the characters, but you know, they're serviceable. And it works perfectly as a throwback to the era of horror movies that I grew up on, that I'm a huge fan of. Just a good old 80s slasher. It reminds me a lot of Scream, actually, and it has a lot of fun with that, the chase scenes, and just building basically just a classic horror movie that we could have now for Thanksgiving that isn't Thanksgiving, the pretty terrible but kind of entertaining, so bad it's good Thanksgiving horror movie that we had before this. Basically the only one that we did have before this. So it's cool that we could add this to the collection of Thanksgiving horror movie that we could watch every year, just like how Silent Night, Deadly Night is for Christmas, like how Halloween is for Halloween. We just have one more holiday that we can now pop in a horror movie that's related to that holiday for, and I'm here for it. I gotta say, it's actually a pretty surprisingly stacked little cast that they got here. Obviously, you have people like Patrick Dempsey, Addison Rae is pretty big. I love that we actually got a Tim Dillon cameo as well in there, playing a small part. So, you know, you have a great cast coming with that, and they all play their parts exactly how I think that they were intended to come across. The movie has incredible gore, a lot of good practical effects. They have many great ways of making you cringe. John Carver does throughout this movie, as well as some of the accidents in the Black Friday sequence. Those are really cringy. They're interesting to watch because they don't look fake. They actually look really damn good and real. I also think that some of what's fun with this movie is that it plays with your expectations a bit. I'm not very good, I feel like, at predicting killers or whatever, you know, seeing what's coming, but also I wasn't sure how ruthless Eli Roth was going to be in this movie, and some of that, you know, some scenes where you think that no way they're going to go that far. It's honestly a toss-up about whether he will or not, because it is Eli Roth, but this is also a little bit more mainstream, so sometimes he does hold back a bit, sometimes he doesn't. It kind of depends scene to scene, but I actually like that he does that because it makes it feel more unpredictable. When you're watching like a Rob Zombie movie or something, if there's something on the table and you have it in your head that it's probably going to happen because that would be the most fucked up thing that could happen in the scene, you know he's probably going to do it. And then on the other side, if there's a director, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, that does things in kind of a more safe way, you could usually tell that they don't have the balls to go there and actually do that. And what I like is that Eli Roth generally will err on the side of he will go for it if that opportunity is there. If you see that thing being set up and it's going to be messed up, he will usually do it. But in this actual version of Eli Roth that we're kind of getting, he plays with that a little bit, and sometimes he teeters a bit, and it just kind of makes for a more interesting watch the first time because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't really anticipate what lines Eli Roth will cross in this movie and which ones he doesn't, which he smartly sometimes doesn't. And it's good because I think that this movie does avoid being distasteful. I know that a lot of people don't like Hostel, don't like Green Inferno, because at times those movies can be very extreme, sometimes even, you know, teeter on being distasteful. So the fact that he's kind of opening himself up more to be a bit more palatable, although I like the version of him that's a lot more edgy, I think that it works for this movie to kind of err on the side of it being a toss-up. I also really like that this movie pays kind of homage to a lot more basic horror movies, you know, ones that are pretty typical, and this feels kind of like it easily could have been a more typical horror movie, but I think that its self-awareness and its comedic wit is what pulls it on the side of being more than that, but it's also at the same time a good, fun, classic slasher. Now kind of getting a bit more into my negatives with the movie. I didn't find the reveal or the mystery really all that compelling, the reasonings and who it turned out to be. I don't know, I mean, not that I like really saw it coming or anything, I just didn't find the resolution to be particularly interesting. And I don't think that it completely fell on its face or anything. It just didn't really do anything for me or had me kind of feeling that way. It's just when you figure out what's going on and why it's happening, you're just kind of like, okay, that's okay. No real lasting impact or anything that I'm gonna take with me about that ending and that reveal and stuff, but I also just don't think that it was a total flop or anything. As well as that, one of the things that I think was working for this movie is actually, for me personally, a bit of a negative, and that it is the fact that I think Eli Roth had a little bit less teeth when he made this movie than he has with other ones. What I like about Hostel is how kind of depressing and nihilistic that movie can be at times. It can be a very, very harsh watch. It can even border on being a bit too much, but I think that that's what makes it more memorable and effective, is that you just kind of have these guys that go overseas. They're, you know, pretty normal, kind of douchey, not even all that likable or endearing, but it's the fact that the situation that they get caught up in is so fucking messed up. And the person that you don't expect to survive kind of ends up being the one who does survive, because in real life, that's kind of how it probably would be. You don't have plot armor for the more likable of the group. It's more like a, do you happen to just survive till the end type thing. With this, you know, it follows a little bit more of a basic template for horror movies than I think his other movies follow. I think his other movies are very much distinctly his. I think this one's a little bit less so. And although I think that for certain portions of what the movie's going for, what the movie's doing, what the movie's achieving, and how it does suspense, I think works in those aspects. But for me, just overall, holistically, and as an Eli Roth fan and a fan of his movies, that stuff kind of lets me down a little bit. And it mainly is just because of my taste of movies, my taste for what Eli Roth does in his movies, and kind of what I expect as a fan of his. But overall, I found Thanksgiving to be a really fun, just classic horror movie that is just very enjoyable, pretty rewatchable, I'd imagine. I'm pretty sure I'll be popping this in again this November. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think of Thanksgiving in the comment section. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.